Well, hello and welcome back to Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. Today we're continuing our exploration of religious experience, thinking about A-level philosophy. Behind me is Cymydwyl, which is a place in North Wales. If you've never been there, it is an absolute beauty spot. You walk up a small cliff and then you're greeted by this massive lake in between a mountain ridge. It really is beautiful, and it is one place that I've stood there and I've looked and I've thought, wow, just something transcends the feeling that I've got right now. Something must have made this, or someone must have made this, because it is so beautiful. That's my own personal feeling when I stand here, but it is something that I know that throughout all seasons it is a lovely, lovely place to visit, and it's one that has a profound effect on me. Today we're going to think about something like that. We're going to think of mystical experiences and something called the Numinous. And without any further ado, here is our intro music. Okay, so hope you had a good little dance while that was on, or maybe not a dance, because that would just be a little bit weird. The music isn't that great. So today, our title, for those of you who are writing things down, and if you are writing things down, I strongly suggest that you write the title down, which is What are Mystical Experiences and the Numinous? So our learning objective today is to explore what a mystical experience is and how it affects people. So our learning outcomes then, it's going to be good if we can describe what a mystical experience is and what the numinous reveals about God. It will be great if you can explain the things that mystical experience demonstrate about God and how the numinous demonstrates transcendence. And it will be even better if you can evaluate if the criteria we study fit two examples of religious experience. Now, I will be honest that these objectives are huge and they will take 2 to 3 sessions for you to get through once we get to the research and the leaflet stage, which we'll look at next time. So today then we're going to look at the numinous, we're going to look at a media clip, we'll look at James, and then next time you'll start on some research and some leaflets. That might take you an hour and a half to do, hence why it will be over 2 to 3 sessions with an exam question to close. So behind me is a picture of somewhere that's very special to me. This is Coventry Cathedral. Some of you may have seen it in the original Nativity film. That's the one where they had the teaching assistant and the teacher, and they did all the singing, and eventually they came off the spire. It's an amazing cathedral, and it is near where I was born. Every Friday lunchtime, they used to have communion services around the cross at the very front of this building, come rain or shine. And that was a very special time when I used to clock off from work and I'd go across and have communion with fellow Christians around the cross. It was a truly spiritual moment in a week which was busy. And I wonder if you had ever had a religious experience, or whether you've ever had an experience similar to the one I spoke about at Cymydwyl. It doesn't have to be a moment when, if you're a Christian or a member of another faith, it doesn't have to be a religious moment like that. But a mystical experience is one that really has an effect on you, that makes you stop and think about the values that you hold dear. I wonder if you've ever climbed a mountain. I know I showed you Cymydwyl, but Cymydwyl isn't really that big or that difficult to get up. I tried to get up the Great Tarn twice in the Lake District and failed both times. However, when I've climbed Snowdon and Cadair Idris in my younger days, I've stood at the top and I've looked around and I've thought, wow, this is amazing. Surely there must be more to life than just me as a little ant climbing a big anthill. So I wonder if you've ever had a similar experience to that. I'd like you to cast your mind back to a corporal and corporeal visions that we spoke about last time. And I'd like you to pause this clip for a moment and just try and remember what the difference was between a corporal and a corporeal experience. So pause this clip now and let's see if you can remember that. Okay, so a corporal experience was an empirical religious experience that was seen by sense, by God through nature. So for example, a mountaintop or artwork or sunset. So you've not physically seen anything, but it is an experience, which is what I've been describing so far. A corporeal vision is one where there's a physical sense of sight. Something supernatural takes place. So for example, Bernadette Souveraud at Lourdes, where she had a vision of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And that's something that we are going to look at as one of our case studies when you're doing your leaflet. So let's just start with understanding a little bit more about the key terms of the numinous. Now, the numinous was coined by Rudolf Otto. You will need to make some notes about this as I go. I'm going to go through this fairly quick, so as normal, pause where you need to. So it's an experience of awe and wonder in the presence of an almighty and transcendent God. It's an awareness of human nothingness when faced with a holy and powerful being. It comes from Numen, which is to bow the head. Such experiences are key to understanding the spirituality of many religions. That's how Otto defines the numinous. So an experience of awe and wonder which transcends anything we're aware of, where we feel tiny, where we feel like a little ant against a huge giant. And that's exactly what the numinous is. It's that moment of feeling wow, and that moment of feeling that we just don't measure against God, whatever that God might be. Rudolf Otto was a German theologist. He rejected the current view of a sociological phenomenon. He maintained that God must be transcendent, above and beyond human understanding, and that religion is rooted in the numinous experience. So he starts by saying that we have to lose our ideas about God being immanent, because God is actually so far beyond anything we can imagine that it's very hard to imagine him at all, because humans are very, very different than God. His book was called The Idea of the Holy, and Otto explored the human sense of the numinous, which is, he believed, common to all religious experiences. I'd like to play what I think to be one of the most funnest clips I've found for philosophy. It is very, very random though, and you may need to watch it back twice. But it explains the numinous really, really well. So without any further ado, sit back, enjoy, make a few notes, make sure you play it twice. 3, 2, 1, random YouTube clip, go.
Throughout much of human history, sages have spoken about the mystical experience, perhaps the most meaningful experience that human beings are capable of having. The mystical experience is an encounter with the transcendent, right? It's an encounter with the numinous, what Otto Rank described as the mysterium tremendum e fascinosum of reality, when the doors of perception are cleansed. And the mystical experience has some characteristics, some persistent hallmarks that always show up, no matter the culture or worldview and belief system of whoever is having it. So there's these common attributes that show up with mystical experiences, and they are the following. The mystical experience is characterized by feelings of cosmic unity, feelings of oneness with everything, feelings of interconnection. The mystical experience is characterized by feelings of transcendence of time and of space. The mind freed from the shackles of the ego, freed from the constraints of time and space. The mystical experience is characterized by positive mood lifting, right? A feeling of bliss, a feeling of ecstasy, a feeling of gratitude, right? Pure magic. The mystical experience is characterized by feelings of the sacred, of connecting with the divine. The mystical experience is characterized by ineffability, a feeling that you can't quite put it into words, that it's an experience beyond language. You can't clothe it with language. The mystical experience is characterized by feelings of paradoxicality, feelings where you can hold multiple perspectives in mind at once, where contradictions are reconciled, where you can conceive of opposites and somehow hold them in mind at once. A mystical experience is characterized by its fleeting quality. It's something that can emerge and can dissolve just as quickly. It's a finite experience. A mystical experience is characterized by feelings of transformative change that are lasting. So even though it's a temporary experience, a person is forever transformed. New perspectives are glimpsed. New visionary understanding is felt. And so a person is forever made better. A person feels like they've seen the light, whereas once we were blind, now we can see. And finally, a mystical experience leaves us with a quality of an noetic flavor, right? There's this sense that what was seen and what was understood and what was felt has some deeper veracity than everyday reality, has some kind of deeper meaning beyond our normal literal grid. There's a sense that there is ultimate truth and ultimate meaning to what was apprehended, and this lasts indefinitely. So these are the hallmarks of a mystical experience, something that as human beings we should all aim to encounter at least once in our lives, because as David Foster Wallace wrote, the alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing.
Okay, hopefully you watched that twice there. If you only saw that the once, I suggest that you watch it again, unless you got that first time round. The Numinous this, the Numinous that. Yeah, I just quite enjoy that clip. So the question is then, how can we describe the numinous aspect of God's nature? Well, according to Otto, we can describe it by only referring to the emotions and thoughts that arise in us. When we get a sense of it in the feelings, that is the numinous, that's the human ability to sense the numinous. So it can only be described as the way that we feel. Otto carefully analysed these feelings or states that constitute the numinous experience, and he concludes that they were made up of two main aspects. The first aspect was creature consciousness, and that was the feeling that a human being is somehow despicable in the eyes of God. So humans are tiny, like that ant giant example I gave earlier. The second thing he talks of is the mysterium tremendum, which comprises of awe, dread and terror before the numen, the sense of being completely overwhelmed by the presence of such majesty, an experience of intense and almost unbearable energy and urgency, and a fascination with it, or an attraction to the numen, and rapture among being connected to it. And I think you got all that really well from the clip that we saw. The numinous experiences are often claimed to be ineffable. This is because the numen is so different and so far surpasses all ordinary categories that a human being had difficulty describing it, and the experience itself can be so overwhelming that they can be struck dumb. However, humans can describe their experiences, even though it doesn't give justice to the numen. And the most important thing to note is that however inarticulate the human might be, they all claim to have perceived something which is holy and external. So the argument is that even though it's difficult to describe, even though it's something that you might not be able to put into words, everyone has a similar experience of something that's holy and external. And therefore there is evidence that this in fact is the correct approach. I've just taken some slides there that you've just seen from a Prezi, which is kind of like a little version of a PowerPoint online. So I know there were some errors, typing errors with that, but I think the content of that was absolutely superb. What we've done is we've started to think a little bit about what the numinous is. Now the numinous links very clearly with a mystical experience, because a mystical experience is one that you cannot explain, hence why the numinous is my starting point. So what we're going to do, and we thought about how the numinous demonstrates transcendence, what we are now going to do is focus on mystical experiences a little bit more, and we're going to look at William James. So he's our next person to make a note of. Now, he reaches 7 key principles, and we're going to go through those very, very briefly. The first one is that organized religion is secondary. He says that organized religion is not actually as important as your experience of God in the first place. We don't have religious experiences because we belong to a religion. We do have religious experience because God is real, and therefore there are real positive results. So that's his first point. So he says obviously being a part of a religion is helpful because that brings us into interaction with God, but that's not the reason for our religious experiences. God is bigger than that. The second thing that William James talks about is that God doesn't appear to be omnipotent or infinite in a mystical experience, or even a single entity. God therefore probably doesn't know the future. So God is immanent massively. So in other words, God is really close and personal. It's different than a numinous from that perspective, which is about transcendence of God. This is about God being very close to us, but therefore if God is close to us, he's within time and space, and if he's within time and space, then he's not able to talk about or demonstrate what is going to happen in the future. The third point that William James talks about is the idea that it's based on experience. So the visible world draws significance from the spiritual. So when you have a mystical experience, it's within the realms of your knowledge that you already have. The point of humanity is to be in union with the higher universe. So there's this concept in William James's world that humanity that sort of gets elevated to a higher plane. Prayer with God is efficacious, it works, and it produces psychological or material effects in this world. So he believes that prayer works and it helps psychologically, but it actually also makes a difference as well when you pray. He says that psychological benefits, for example, are a zest for life, for assurance, for safety, and for peace. And then he talks about 4 criteria for mystical states. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to now download this document. It's the one which is called Mystical States by William James. And I'd like you to have a read over that. There are 4 main mystical states which he speaks about, which is ineffably, noetic quality, transiency, and passivity. And what I'd like you to do in your notes is to bullet point down a simple sentence definition about each of them, and then say something that's positive or something that's good about that particular aspect. What's good about ineffability, what's good about noetic quality, and so on, and then what's not so helpful with that as a thought. So why does it not work? What are the issues that you can perceive for each of those? So just to repeat, you're going to write down those 4. You're going to find the information on the sheets, then doing a little bit of thinking, you're going to say what is strong and what is weak about each of those. So pause this clip now and let's get that done. Great. Okay, so his 6th point then, because that was point 5, is there is a wide range of mystical experiences, from little religious significance to those where it is huge, and God meets people on an individual basis of his personal concerns. So there is peace and there is challenge. Okay, so what I'd like you now to do is just have a quick gander over the document you downloaded, and just to make sure that you've got all the key things that you've either identified or you've written in your notes. Okay, so just coming up to the end of our first session together on this topic then, mystical experiences and the numinous. We said it'd be good if we could describe what a mystical experience is and what the numinous reveals about God, and hopefully you're able to do that now. Great if you can explain the things that mystical experience demonstrates about God and the numinous demonstrates about transcendence, and again hopefully we should now be really clear on that. And we haven't yet done our last learning objective, but that's okay because we know we're going to do that next time. So the final thing I'd like you to do is there's one last information sheet that's on the Google Drive which I'd like you to download. It is quite a lengthy document, but use your time to read over that and just to see if there's got any questions there at all. And if you do, jot a note to your teacher and just give us a shout. Thank you very much for your time. Take care, stay safe, wash hands, God bless you, and I'll see you in a few days' time.